you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast, the hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hello, this is Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, the only things that makes official. Welcome to 16 years and 2,800 episodes of the Chris Voss Show. Coming in a little late there with the clapping, folks. Come on, audience. Get with it. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss. For your family, friends, and relatives, go to youtube.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, facebook.com/Chris Voss, and all those crazy places we exist on the internet. Opinions expressed by guests on the podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the Chris Voss Show. Some guests of the show may be advertising on the podcast, but it is not an endorsement or review of any kind. Today's featured author comes to us from bookstolifemarketing.co.uk. With expert publishing to strategic marketing, they help authors reach their audience and maximize their book success. Today we have an amazing young man. We're going to be talking about his insightful book called Politicization of the American Legal System. Dr. James M. Copas joins us in the show. We're going to be talking about his book, his insights, and all that good stuff. And you're going to learn what's been going on out there in the worldwide whatever. Dr. James Copas was born and raised in Hamilton, Ohio, graduated from Taft Senior High School in Hamilton, Ohio. Then Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. They might have a proximity problem where they're like, do they know that they're in Ohio? No, I'm just teasing. Anyway, he has an AA and a BA. I have a CC, but it's mostly credit cards. He then graduated from the University of Detroit Mercy School of Law with his Juris Doctor degree. He then graduated from Stetson University College of Law in St. Peters, Florida. Those are the guys who make one of my old favorite 1980s perfume or cologne for men. Stetson. With his LLM degree in international law, business, and trade, he went to Chicago, where he graduated from the John Marshall Law School with an LLM in intellectual property law. The University of Illinois later issued another LLM diploma to Mr. Copas in intellectual property law after having merged with the John Marshall Law School. Welcome to the show. How are you, James?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. I think I'm going to refer to you as Jim during the show, we decided. Give us your .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interweb, sir?
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Give us your .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
On the internet?
Yes.
You know what? I know it sounds silly, but I don't remember the website off the top of my head.
Tell you what, we're going to put that link on the Chris Voss Show, and people will be able to find it there. How about that?
That'll be good.
That'll be awesome. Jim, give me a 30,000 overview of your book and kind of an opening thing on it.
Okay, very good. Let's start with this. The American legal system, as you may or may not know, was designed to be a stabilizing force in our constitutional architecture.
What?
Yes, it was. It exists to ensure that no matter who wins elections, the rules remain predictable, essentially. Now, that's a high-level overview. The predictability is not just a political principle, it's an economic necessity. Today, many Americans perceive the judiciary as politically aligned rather than institutionally independent. Whether that perception is fully accurate is less important than the fact that it actually exists. Yeah. Because perception drives trust, and trust sustains institutions. My book argues that when judicial appointments, media narratives, and litigation strategies become overtly partisan, one way or the other, the long-term consequences is not just simply political tension, it's structural instability. Entrepreneurs, investors, executives, communities, frankly, depend on the stable rule of law environment. When courts are viewed as extensions of political factions, that stability weakens. This book is not about defending one party or criticizing the other. It's about defending structure. Because without structural integrity in our legal system, democratic governance and economic predictability both erode. My book, The Politicization of the American Legal System, examines how increasing partisan influence over judicial appointments and public perception is weakening trust in the courts. I argue that judicial independence is not just a constitutional idea, it's a foundation of our economic stability and democratic durability. This book offers nonpartisan structural reforms aimed at restoring the confidence in the rule of law. It's really that simple at a high level.
And that's really important. I mean, you surmised it perfectly there as to why having a judicial system that is impartial. I mean, what's the picture of the woman holding the scales with the blindfold?
Yeah.
And yeah, it creates a stable society. It creates a stable system. Now, when did you write this book? When did you publish this book? I should probably know.
It was published early December 2025. It's on the market now. It took a couple years, 2.5 years, if I remember correctly, to write the book. And it was really, if I may share with you, 3 motivating factors that brought it to mind and actually stimulated the idea of writing the book. The first is, as you cited earlier in the conversation, I've had the good fortune to attend and graduate from several law schools. I got 4 legal diplomas hanging on the wall. I understand the law, and I know how the law works. So I have that fundamental understanding from an intellectual perspective. I consider that a positive. On the negative side, I had the misfortune of becoming very active at a high level in one of the political parties, state party. Are you with me? As a consequence of that position, I was involved with the national party on a daily basis. So I got to see the good and the bad and the ugly from the inside. Oh. And while I, as an individual, as a citizen, as one guy that votes, I do honestly believe one party is 1,000 feet underwater. However, the other party is 500 feet underwater. What's the difference? Either way, you're going to drown and you're not going to make it. And I think that really is the option today for the American people. And it's a sad state of affairs in my view. And to be honest with you, it was very disheartening for me to witness what I witnessed firsthand. So that was the second motivation. The third motivation is that my wife, Lynette, and I are both very, very serious about our Christian faith. And we feel it's our duty as individuals consistent with our faith to do everything we can to try to shine the light on the truth, whatever the truth is. Not my version of the truth or the guy next door's version, but in fact, the truth. Now, this book doesn't target one ideology or another. It simply focuses on the truth that the structural integrity of the judicial system has got to be right, or the country will fail, the economy will fail. If, on the other hand, it is right, and there's a lot of things that at least I believe need to be done, if it is structurally sound like it was designed to be when our country was formed, we can be ravingly successful. And it is the backbone of what drives everything, in my opinion. Yeah. And I think the book essentially argues that. So those were the motivating factors.
Do you talk about some of the things that have happened in the course or history of SCOTUS and maybe the broad judicial system? But I think SCOTUS maybe is let me ask you this first. Do you think that SCOTUS is the body that is the one saddled with maintaining the unbiased of the judiciary and setting an example or leadership position to the judiciary? Is that kind of where maybe all the problems start? Maybe, I don't know.
Well, if they don't start there, they certainly end there. And I do. Obviously, it's the highest court in the land. Yeah. And you know, I know that there are some people who will disagree with. There's some legal scholars who will disagree with what I'm about to say. But my honest opinion is the study of constitutional law is actually the easiest subject matter area of the law. It's not nearly as complicated as tort law or criminal law or any of the others, intellectual property law for sure. Constitutional law, it's It's simple. There's the Constitution. Issues are either in the Constitution or they're not in the Constitution. The justices have a job to do. Their job is to know the Constitution, to interpret the Constitution. That's their job. Their job is not to change it. They're not part of the legislative branch. And that's one of the problems inside the judiciary today, both at the state level and at the federal level. Virtually every judge that puts on a black robe gets seduced into thinking that it's okay to legislate from the bench. And that's not okay. Yeah. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's contrary to the way they're trained. It's bad. In fact, the truth of the matter is the judiciary has never really been free of political context, but it was designed to be insulated from the political pressure.
Yeah.
Even back in the early 1800s in Marbury versus Madison, the court stepped straight into political conflict. However, what has changed is not that politics exists, it's the intensity and the visibility of partisan alignment. The impact, therefore, for business leaders from a commercial perspective in our economy is really this. The key issue isn't whether judges have philosophies. It's whether outcomes appear predictable and grounded in law rather than party identity. Markets depend on the perception that contracts, regulations, and constitutional rules will not swing wildly between election cycles.
Yeah.
That's the judiciary being the stabilizing factor.
Up until I think just like in the last 10, 20 years, maybe the SCOTUS as kind of our infighting in Congress and politics and stuff and parties and just about everything else, between Congress and the presidency, their battles and some skirmishes kind of brought down a lot of trust that the American people had. Correct me if I'm wrong, too, because I'm just going off of my memory. But SCOTUS usually had a high regard up until recently. Is that correct?
That is correct. In fact, the deterioration, at least it's cited by many of the noted legal scholars, really the acceleration began with the confirmation battles when they became ideological proxy wars. I mean, as an example, the turning point that many identify is the rejection of Robert Bork in 1987, which transformed confirmations into national political campaigns. From a business standpoint, that moment increased volatility around judicial appointments. When every nomination becomes an existential activity, institutional stability weakens, and stability, of course, is the oxygen of markets. It's counterproductive if we don't get it straightened out, to be very candid. But in 87 is really when it got grossly out of line. In addition to that, if you remember the Bush v. Gore case, the decision in Bush-Gore placed the court squarely and directly at the center of electoral politics. It was as though the United States Supreme Court decided the presidency.
Yeah.
No matter who you were for, it was not relevant. The process, in my view, was abused. That issue had no business, in my opinion, being in front of the Supreme Court. That was a congressional legislative issue that should have been handled, at least in that regard. I think the same thing, to be very candid with you, and I know this is a sensitive subject for a lot of people, but what was it? The 60s and the 70s, right. Very liberal Supreme Court, Roe v. Wade, of course, a big case. That's an example of a subject matter, whether you're pro or pro-life, pro-choice or pro-life is not relevant. What is relevant is that subject matter should have never been before the Supreme Court in the first place. That is an issue that should have been dealt with U.S. Congress and the U.S. Senate. And if they had the votes to pass a law, they could. If they didn't, they wouldn't. And it was an absolute legal fiction that the liberal Supreme Court of the day dreamt up when they affirmed Roe v. Wade. And it all centered on the concept of a woman's privacy rights in her own body, which is not expressed anywhere in the Constitution.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay. And so what did the court do to fix it? They turned around in Dobbs and turned it around. Now, on one hand, they in fact corrected it. On the other hand, they created the same sin, they actually committed the same sin, in my view, that the court in Roe v. Wade did when they got involved in a subject matter they shouldn't have been involved in.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of at least in my view, there's two processes going on. One is I'll refer to as the rule of law. And I don't mean that term in the cute way that politicians throw it around when they really don't even know what they're talking about, frankly. What I mean when I am referring to that, what I'm talking about is the purity of the study of law, the logic of law, and the proper application of the law. When that's done right and the law is applied properly, as you are trained in law school to do it, and by the way, they all have the same education because it's highly regulated and every law school teaches essentially the same curriculum. The rule of law is pure. Now, separate from that, you got the judiciary. And the judiciary is just a bunch of people. All of us are fallible. We all make mistakes. Judges make mistakes. And they get tempted into thinking somehow when they put that black robe on, they can do pretty much whatever they want. And they legislate from the bench. And they sometimes don't even realize what they're doing. And they dream up these legal fictions that it's really outside of the scope of their job, frankly. Their job is to apply the law, create the law. That's up to the legislature. And so those are functional corrections that, at least in my view, need to be dealt with so as to restore a high level of integrity in the courts, trust, predictability, and it all leads to a stable economy and stable markets and just predictability.
Yeah, I agree with you. Those definitely were flashpoints for, where the court became politicized and different political groups started realizing that if you game the SCOTUS, if you game the court, you could win elections. And boy, they sure saw that with Bush versus Gore. Let me ask you this, just for my own knowledge and stuff. We've had people on that were in the investigations for Watergate and stuff. My understanding, and Lee, you're the lawyer, and I'm just the amateur boy here, so that's why I'm asking. But my understanding was the thing with Bork that was the hang up for the hungover in most of the rest of his career was that he was the one that fired all the people for Nixon. Everyone resigned, but Bork didn't resign, and he fired the people, and that haunted him throughout the rest of his career, and was one of the reasons they wouldn't give him the SCOTUS. Is that true, or is that? What do you think?
I'd have to go back and read the entire file to be able to speak to it intelligently. But the point is, up to that point, confirmations. Let me back up and say this. All 9 of if you think about this in theory, all 9 of the justices graduated from law school. They all studied the same curriculum. They all passed a similar bar exam, right? Okay. If their job is to apply the law, if that's their job, and they can park their personal feelings at the door when they walk in with their black robe, if they can do that, park their own individual ideological leanings, whatever they might happen to be, at the door. If they can do that, in theory, you're going to have 9-0 decisions almost all the time.
Oh, wow.
Because they all come to the same conclusion because that's what they were trained to do. Okay, since Bork, in particular since Bork, that's not the case. Now, prior to that time, you had a lot of 9-0 decisions. You had a lot of 8-1s, 7-2s, that kind of thing. Since that time, it's been a lot closer. And it's all centered around ideological differences, justices being unable to separate their own personal leanings, whatever they might happen to be, and leave that at the door and actually do their job, which is interpret the law, apply the Constitution. That's it.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Do you feel that there's people on SCOTUS now that don't have that? I mean, I kind of like the fact that I can buy a judge by just giving them an RV to drive around in.
I got to be honest. I honestly believe that while federal judges, including the Supreme Court, they're different animals than state judges, while they are different systems, the fact of the matter is they're both heavily politically influenced. Yeah. As an example, at the state level, I mean, they're de facto politicians because they actually run for election. Okay, so for them to say that they're not a politician and it's a nonpartisan election and all that, that's laughable. It's not even. I mean, I don't know how they do it with a straight face, to be honest.
I've often wondered about that when I vote for judges. I'm like, this seems a little. When I see them showing signs and hustling for money, I mean, that's kind of the problem we have with Citizens United ruling from SCOTUS and other rulings that have made it so you can pretty much buy who you want. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It's yes. And when I was involved with one of the parties at a very high level at one of the states, what I saw made me sick, to be very candid. And it's really out of hand, and both parties are equally guilty in my view. But that's a state level judges. I think there's tremendous reform opportunities available there. But at the federal level, the whole notion that a president's elected, the president can nominate federal judges, right? He's not going to nominate anybody that doesn't, whoever the president is. Whether it's a liberal president or a conservative president, they're not going to nominate anyone that's not consistent with their own point of view on these issues. And to think otherwise is just foolish. It's laughable to think otherwise. And that's what they do. And so these people, many of them get confirmed, and it's generally a pretty contentious, review by the Senate and so on and so forth. And in fact, it's really such an unprofessional experience. It's kind of insulting, frankly. At least I find it to be that. It almost has nothing to do to the actual qualifications of the individual. It's entirely addressing down of whatever their political views are one way or the other. And of course, then when they get on the court in a lifetime appointment, and they're biased by their own views on this, that, or whatever, that impacts their decisions because they're human. And my view is the reform opportunities at the federal level are dramatic. As an example, one of the things that I believe should happen is that there has to be some way to actually replace justices and federal judges if they fail to apply the law properly, and it's some weird legal theory they've dreamt up to come to whatever conclusion that they came up with. Now, I realize what I just said isn't very artfully said, but the truth of the matter is, if they stay in their lane, apply the law, and quit trying to create law, they would be fine. That is their job. And they've got to be able to do that to be a good judge. And in my opinion, if they can't do that, they shouldn't be considered qualified to be a judge.
Yeah. Who would oversee a body like that? I mean, that's one of the things we've kind of discovered with SCOTUS and some of these things like the RV story and some of these other things. Who would we have to create a governing body? Because there's governing bodies that oversee all the justice system throughout. You can appeal through the whole system. But having this system of where these guys are the final boss, and we recently found out over the last few years there was no sort of ethical, most of the justices and attorneys have to adhere to ethical standards and, show that they're not being biased by people buying them RVs. We found out that these guys didn't have any rules. It's just like they can do whatever they want, kind of.
Essentially, yes. And first of all, let me say this. It's not the ABA that should have any involvement in it at all. And the ABA's rules of ethics, the Supreme Court, if I'm not mistaken, have decided that those rules don't even apply to them. But that aside, there needs to be an oversight committee that turns over on a regular basis so that it itself doesn't become corrupt. But there should be absolutely fixed criteria. You cross that line, you get your hands slapped the first time. The second time, you're out, in my opinion. Because people, when I say people, I'm talking you, me, the average Joe that votes, and is trying to feed his family, that sort of thing. They deserve consistency of the application of the law, not prejudicial application. And frankly, I, as a voter, don't care what an individual judge's opinion of anything is. What I care about are their intellectual capabilities of understanding what the law is and applying it. That's what I care about. And if they do that, I think they're doing their job. If they muck it up with their own personal feelings and insights, that's where it gets nasty. And that's why we got a lot of 5-4 decisions and so on and so forth. And I think it's potentially threatening to the overall integrity of the judiciary in general, frankly.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. We're kind of dealing with this thing that we've never really had to deal with as human beings in the arc of our existence. We're now living longer than ever before. I mean, I often complain about how old I am. I'm 58 now. But then I'll think and realize that 100 years ago, people didn't live to my age, mostly, on rare occasions. In fact, when they invented Social Security, it was a great deal for the government because 10% of people made it to 65. So they're like, we had to keep all the money here. Now they hate it because everyone's living to 90 and 100. And, we've seen how our Congress and I think we can say our presidency now twice have turned in these geriatric rest homes, and they're wonderful people. Let's not put it that way. They're maybe slightly still competent in thing. They're a little off their game. I'm 58 and I'm off my game. I mean, I can tell. I'm off my game. I'm not 100%. And to have these lifetime judges and, these people that in Congress that, we've been seeing people falling down in Congress, Mitch McConnell, and it breaks your heart. I don't Mitch McConnell, but to see him falling as a aged person that should probably be, with his family, and there's also a mess of examples of this Democratic side. And so having these SCOTUSes that are now at this, they can never be removed. They stay in until they're forever. I have a lot of respect for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We had her secretary on the show, but some of the discussions you see as to how coherent maybe these people are, and they're deciding the lives and future of people that are going to succeed them by far. And, I really question some of the competency at a certain level of age. Like I say, I'm not throwing rocks. I'm 58 and I'm not sharp anymore. And I don't know how much I'll be when I hit 80. I'm just going to be drilling on the side of my face when I turn 80 pretty much, I think. So what are your thoughts on that?
First of all, keep in mind, these are non-elected people.
Yeah.
They weren't elected by anybody to any position to do anything. They were appointed. The concept that it's a lifetime appointment is foolish, in my opinion. And I don't think it's in the interest of the country. To be honest with you, I don't think it's in the interest of the judges themselves if you could get them to really admit that and think about it. And I don't think it's in the interest of the function that they are asked to provide and serve the people with. I honestly believe that if I had to pick 3 top reforms, I think the first one would be of a very, very, very transparent, highly critical, merit-based evaluation process. And part of that is not just their intellectual ability to understand the law and apply the law, but their ability to be non-biased, regardless of what their personal ideological beliefs are, because that drags politics into their decision of the law. And remember, the judiciary is to be independent of that, of the politics. That's the case. Now, it has, like I've already touched on, gleefully, historically marched into that arena, and it's I believe was a mistake and a misuse of their authority. But the reality is that's what we're dealing with. But a transparent, merit-based, highly critical evaluation process. And there has to be a body of oversight that takes a look at that and watches that carefully and evaluates their judgments and so on and so forth. And that body has to be turned over, because there shouldn't be any kingdom building at that level either. In addition to that, there's got to be clear ethical and recusal standards. Whatever they turn out to be, they have to be highly critical, very clear. You cross the line. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how many great things you've done. You're out if you cross the line. And it's really that straightforward. The position of being a judge is so critical, you can't afford to do anybody favors, in my view. I also think there should be a very, very structured, predictable judicial tenure reform. Lifetime appointments is something that doesn't really apply today, in my view, and needs to be reformed. I think it would be in the interest of the judiciary. I think it's in the interest of the country. I think it's in the interest of the economy. And of course, in the interest of guys like you and me who vote and do the best we can, and so on and so forth. And that's what I think needs to be taken a hard look at. So when people read this book, that's what they'll come out of it with, I hope. They'll see that I'm not promoting one ideology over the other. I'm simply focusing on the structural integrity of the system and offering some ideas about what we might consider doing to correct things going forward.
Yeah. And I mean, you saw the abuses in the system. You saw them going on trips. And the other thing that really bugs me, like someone was at the Federal Society the other day, I think Scalia or somebody. Yeah. And, I think we're pretty familiar with what they're up to. I don't know who the leaning committees are on the right side or on the left side that picket for the Democrats. You think I know. But, to constantly see the dinners and the awards and the jerk off, really. I mean, that's really, come on. It's You can't tell me there's not a slight of quid pro quo there. Oh. I mean, if I take you on enough vacations, whether you're conscious of it or not, you're gonna favor me a little bit. And I'm not picking on one party. I'm just using that example because I just saw it, and I know that goes on a lot. They go on these, both are entertained, and they give these stupid awards to them. These people don't need awards. They're on SCOTUS. They're going to be in history for fucking ever. They don't need a vacuum cleaner award from some company. I don't know. That's just my opinion. I don't know.
I completely agree. They have to be immune to those things. I mean, it's almost, to be honest with you, it's almost like you're asking a fallible human, which we are all fallible. You're asking them to be a superhuman, which we are. And by the way, if you're not willing to subject yourself to that scrutiny, you've eliminated yourself as a potential candidate as a judge, in my mind. Yeah. That's how important that position is. If someone is willing to subject to themselves to that level of scrutiny, and they have the intellectual ability to understand the law and to apply the law properly, that's, at least in my view, what you want as a judge. Somebody that's objective, fair-minded, sees no color, sees no anything, other than justice, blindly applied.
And each side tends to pick their SCOTUS judges and recommend to the president. Maybe there needs to be like a bipartisan or nonpartisan, I don't know how you do that, but nonpartisan board that actually picks judges and can offer the, because, we're pretty familiar with what the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society have been up to since Betsy DeVos and her father in 1973 with Nixon. They've been trying to stack the court and flip the court. They also realized that the best way to stack the court, win the court, and get what they want, ultimate power, is to win not on the popular vote, but win the game of the, the college vote, the electoral college vote. And that's been a process they've been actively working at and funding since Nixon. And they won. They seriously won. When you really look at Citizens United and other things that have been very anti-democratic to our process, and where basically we've sold the country out to oligarchs. If you're a billionaire, you can buy anybody you want, any politician you want. We recently saw this in Utah, where the voters had, I think in 2018 or something, they had voted to have a nonpartisan, gerrymandering is the right word, but basically to make sure things aren't gerrymandered, and to have their maps for elections and not muck with, and hopefully be sent up with some sort of anti-bias. The Republican legislature here, as they always do, decided that was not something that was going to work for them, and so they've been trying to overturn it, throw it out, even assailing the judge and different things, all sorts of devious little tricks and things they do. And if you lived in Utah long enough, you understand what goes on here. And that was pretty interesting to watch in trying to overturn the will of the people. They even cheated on the names to the point that so many of them got removed. They didn't meet the bar to put on the thing. But, maybe there needs to be something like that, where we need to have more of that, where there's that oversight or something where people can't push the buttons. Oh, the thing I was getting to is they were struggling with that process, the Republicans, to put it onto the ballot to overturn the will of the people from 2018. And things were going well, and some billionaire or some multimillionaire came in with $4 million of money to put his thumb on the scale and buy that conversion. And he doesn't even live in the state. And everyone's just sitting here going, Jesus, I mean, this is an oligarchy. A billionaire can just come in and buy an election, quote unquote, or put on the tablet what he wants and forego the will of the people in a state he doesn't even live in. Like the Utahns have to live with whatever they decide and their legislature decides. But to have that, it's just extraordinary to watch.
It is, and I'll tell you again, and I'm certainly no expert politician by any stretch of the imagination, but the time that I spent inside that political party's state operation and right at the highest level, I'm telling you, it's a dirty business. It is a dirty business, and to act like it's not a dirty business is disingenuous at a minimum. Yeah. It is really. It's not something to be proud of, frankly. I mean, if we allow that to corrupt our judicial system, we're lost. We're lost.
Yeah. I mean, just billionaires can buy whatever they want. Lobbyists can buy whatever they want. We're kind of there now. I'm trying to think of the other ruling. There was Citizens United, and there was another ruling that basically just opened up to where you can buy your politicians and fund them with dirty money any way which you want, and all this stuff. And it really, has accelerated the crisis we've seen, I think, in politics since that ruling. But yeah, and so are there other outlines in the book that you give to remedy the system or try and improve it?
There's recommendations of a wide variety. Of course, as we've kind of alluded, it's really not up to me. Of course, it's not up to you. My hope is to have people read the book, understand the sense of urgency, and start to ask the questions and push their representatives to take this issue seriously. And let's get on with reforms that are meaningful, that will allow us to actually restore the court to what it was intended to be. And that really is the referee between the executive branch and the legislative branch. They are the arbiter of those sort of conflicts. what they should be. And the law should be applied fairly and equally and consistently and in a predictable manner. And the truth of the matter is the Constitution is the Constitution. It isn't a living document. It shouldn't change. The Founding Fathers didn't say it should change, so on and so forth. Now, I'm not saying that it's absolutely perfectly written, which is why they left it open for amendments, but there's a process through the legislative branch to, of course, enact those amendments, and that can be done, and that's the way we ought to do it.
And I think a lot of the problem too is the politicians, instead of legislating, they just run cases up the court line to take it to SCOTUS and try and see if the conservative leading SCOTUS will wander in their favor.
Is exactly what they do, and to the shame of the judicial system, they allow it to happen, and they know very well that's not their duty. They know very well that that's a legislative issue that should go through the legislature, and those kinds of cases should be turned away, in my opinion.
Yeah, we've seen that with Donald Trump and it's 2026, folks. If you're watching this 10 years from now on YouTube, as you do, we've been on YouTube for 18 years, and they're always like writing stuff like the iPhone 5 didn't come out last week, dude. Look at the date. Anyway, he started dragging things directly to the SCOTUS, and when in reality, to my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not an attorney, I just talked to one on podcast, that really should go up through the court system and be vetted maybe, or be torn apart and looked at and analyzed through the system that we have.
Some matters should go through the courts, there's no question, but matters that are inherently legislative issues that should be voted on by Congress and then ultimately the Senate and so on and so forth, and put before the president for a veto or not. Those processes are in place for a reason, and that's the way those issues should be handled. Issues that are legitimately inside the judicial system, so be it. But to take advantage of the judicial system simply to bypass the legislative process, which in my opinion is what happened with Roe v. Wade, and it was corrected by Dobbs, which committed the same sin, in my opinion. That's wrong. From a legal perspective, I believe that's just flat wrong.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like, and I think Justice Roberts has alluded this, or one of the other justices, but they've alluded that, hey, Congress and President, you guys need to legislate more stuff instead of just throwing it at us. And I think that compounds the politicization. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I think that's part of it as well. Absolutely. Absolutely. But the reality is justices are, at least in my view, they're hesitant to push back too hard.
Yeah.
They kind of, it's a kind of a double-edged sword the way I see it. On one hand, I think from a moral perspective, from a legal intellectual perspective, they know that's what they should do, but they're human and they kind of like the power.
Yeah. Plus those RVs are pretty cool.
They are pretty cool. Yes, you're right.
Yeah. I want a free RV.
Yeah. They kind of like the power. And when you actually sit back and think about the fact that the Supreme Court, 9 people made the decision as to who the president was going to be, in Bush, Gore. That is mind-blowing to me. Absolutely mind-blowing. Now, I'm not criticizing the outcome or saying it should have been the other way I'm not making a judgment. I'm just saying that is a decision that, in my view, is outside of their lane. It should have been dealt with from a legislative perspective. I just think that was a misuse of the courts, and the courts should not have gotten involved.
Really, where I think the Democrats woke up and realized Betsy DeVos had won the war of being able to stack the Electoral College against the popular vote. And I mean, it's kind of this whole Electoral College thing. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on Electoral College? You talked about that in the book at all, or whether that thing needs to stay or go?
Yeah, I think the Electoral College is a good thing in the sense that it normalizes the effect and the ability of smaller states to be heard. Short of that, New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles would rule the country.
Maybe they should. They're the ones who bring in all the money.
Not when you think about what gave rise to the country in the first place.
Yeah.
And that was essentially 50 little countries.
Yeah.
And I mean that metaphorically, of course. They weren't literally little countries, but essentially they were. And they came together as the United States. And so there are rights beyond just individual rights. You got to remember, Chris, we're not a democracy. We never have been a democracy. We're not going to be a democracy. The only time in the history of mankind when a pure democracy ever worked was about a 30-year period in ancient Greece with the rule of Pericles. And most of that had to do with Pericles, the individual. He was a highly educated, very affluent, benevolent, honest man who loved his people.
Oh, they never like that guy nowadays.
Yeah, and how many leaders do you have like that?
Narcissism right? Seems to be the rule of the day if you want to run for politics. Yeah, I'm sorry, we've had great politicians on the show. We just have the clean, nice, good ones. And a lot of them are bipartisan too that we have on the show, but there is a narcissistic ability to it. I mean, even I'm narcissistic, so I can't throw rocks.
Yeah, but the point is when Pericles died, that's when it all fell apart in Greece from a democratic perspective. So we're a constitutional republic, as you know, and there are reasons for that. And one thing I'd like to highlight, and a lot of people may not remember this or think about it very much, but in the history of the United States of America, we've had one president, that got it right as it relates to political parties. And that was George Washington.
Oh, okay.
In his farewell address from his second term, he warned against the dangers of political parties. He thought it was not in the interest of Americans to be trained to fight Americans, where you have one party fighting the other party. What he believed, and this is oversimplified, was that as an American, it is your duty to educate yourself about the issues of the day, the things that are being voted on, develop your own ideas, and vote accordingly. And it's really that simple. That's how simple he saw it.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure that isn't what we should be really trying to get to and sidestepping the parties, because I just don't.
Problem now is, I always say this on the show, and I talk to people about this, and one of the lines that I use, it's my quote, I guess, is each of us are responsible, or each of us are stewards of our democracy. Each of us has to, and I may have ripped that off of George Washington or something, that final speech, but each of us are stewards of our democracy. It is our job daily to maintain it, enforce it, and have our best interests at heart in that. But people nowadays, they're too busy watching The Bachelor and the Kardashians and whatever sort of IQ melting bullshits on TikTok this week. And, I'll talk to people, I don't have time to follow politics. I see what you're doing in your life. You sit in front of the TV for 5 hours a day, drilling out the side of your mouth, watching the most dumbest shit in the world. And if you're not doing that, you're on social media doing it. And I can throw rocks because I do it too. I doom scroll too. But to see the amount of people that I talk to on both sides of the parties that are just, number one, they don't pay attention. They don't follow up. They don't, they just vote and forget for 4 years. And then they'll sit and complain.
First of all, I think that's human nature to be a little lazy. But in this country, we've been so blessed with so many great things and so many great opportunities that we have been trained to take advantage of those things and just expect those things. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine what would happen if suddenly tomorrow no one had indoor plumbing, as an example? What if that just went away? What if there was no natural gas or fuel for your vehicles or this, that, or whatever that was a result of a crisis of one sort or another?
We're working on that right now, 2026.
Yeah, you're got that right.
You may not be presenting theory. on that.
Yeah, no, you're right. But the point I'm trying to make is we've been very spoiled. We've had it pretty good, and I think we take it for granted, and that's not the standard of living that the rest of the world is used to.
Let me ask you this, and I think I've got the cue from the PR sheet, but SCOTUS has been accused of a lot of originalist, creationist, maybe not creationist, but they've been creating originalist sort of interpretations of the Constitution instead of enforcing the Constitution. They've been, to my understanding, this originalist thing is like they've been going back to the original Constitution and try to say what it is as opposed to the tort law or the presumed precedence of law that's been established and built on the Constitution since. Does that sound correct, or what is the truth on that?
The question really is, what is the difference between originalism, textualism, and activism, and how are these labels, how do they become political weapons? I mean, the answer, in my view, is really this straightforward. Judicial philosophies like originalism or living constitutionalism were once academic debates, just academic debates. Today, they're often shorthand for political alignment. But the real issue is for entrepreneurs, what matters, and I get back to this, the rule of law has got to be predictable because it drives our economy. For entrepreneurs, what matters is consistency. Businesses can adapt to a strict interpretation of the Constitution or an expansive one. They can literally adapt one way or the other. What they cannot adapt to easily is the unpredictability driven by partisan shifts. That's what we've got to be able to protect the judiciary from.
Yeah.
In my view. Yeah,
and this whole money thing that they've got going on, I just think it's so filthy. You're paid to come speak. You're paid to go on trips. There's this. I mean, really, if they adhere to the job, they should just be isolated. I mean, in my mind, a lot of judges can't do it. They get the grift they're getting.
It's like I said, we're asking them to be superhuman, right? Yeah. We're asking them to put themselves in a bubble, stay away from everybody else, focus on just their job, 5 or 6 years, 10 years, whatever the number is, and then they're out.
Yeah.
And then we come in with new blood, and it's the same sort of boot camp. So at least in my opinion, it's highly merit-driven, intellectually driven. They've got to be the kind of personality that can park their egos at the door, park their personal bias at the door, apply the law. If they do that, at least in my view, things run smoother. When they start weaving in their own personal ideological preferences and trying to create legal arguments to support those preferences, that's, in my view, abuse of the law.
Yeah. And
it's an abuse of their position and it's abuse of their power, and they should be gone.
Yeah. And plus it just gives anybody who sees it, what is that line? The appearance
absolutely
of indiscretion, or
there's no predictability. I mean, you have no trust. Public trust degrades, compliance degrades. Then enforcement costs go up and so on and so forth, and everything spiral out of control.
Yeah. And here we are, 2026.
Yeah. Amen. Amen.
What's that old line? It's my favorite thing. I say almost on a daily basis now. The Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. I'm at the point where I'd rather not live in interesting times. I'd take some boring times right now. Just give me a farm and a cow, and I could use a break at this point.
Yeah, no, I get it. I'm right there with you. Yeah. I'm right there with you.
I'm glad you've presented reforms. Do you see a vision for? I mean, you're going to get this out there from a book thing, but can we just mail this to each one of the SCOTUS folks and, I don't know, see if they come up with any ideas?
Mail the book to them, you say?
Yeah, mail the book to them. Maybe we can do that.
If it could get through the screening, maybe they might read it. Yeah. I don't know. But the reality is there's a lot of work that needs to be done. It would have to go through the legislative branch, ultimately, Congress and the Senate, and get past the president's desk and all that sort of thing. But if, in fact, it was taken seriously, it could be done. Yeah. It absolutely could be done.
I think what we need to do is first we need to trick everybody, and I think the White House, Congress, and SCOTUS can all fit this. And what we're going to do is we're going to build exact models of those offices and rooms. And then we're just going to make them a giant rest home. It will be a rest home with nurses and shit. And then they're going to think they're going to work every day. They did this with Donald Trump's father for 10 years when he had Alzheimer's. They gave him a fake office. And so he would think, and you kind of have to do that with people in Alzheimer's and dementia because something familiar comforts them. And if you throw them in a completely, anyway. And then what we do is pass some term limit laws, say, none of this bullshit anymore. And then we have some rules and regulations for these people. The presidency and SCOTUS were two of the things we learned in the last 15 years, that a lot of the stuff was just based upon integrity and instead of law. Like I always thought a lot of the shit that got broken in the last 15 years, there was like a laws for it. And they're just like, nah, it's just kind of an appearance of integrity. And, no one's ever been an asshole so far in 230 years, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. And it's so we just do that and reset it. Let's get in really quickly. I think you had some other plugs for some of the other work you're doing as well, other books that are coming up.
Yeah, I have a few that should be out in the early summer. Artificial Intelligence and Global Security, the Implications of AI for Warfare and International Peacekeeping.
That should be interesting.
International Peacekeeping. It's a 2-volume set. It invokes international law, the sovereign law of individual nation states. There's a lot of technological AI-related stuff in the book that needs to be dealt with and addressed. And the truth is, from a legal perspective, internationally, we're not in a position currently to actually get our arms wrapped around it, which even makes AI used for these purposes more dangerous. But it's a big deal, and I've tried to address it comprehensively in the book, and the book will be out this summer. In addition to that, I got a second one, The Impact of Globalization on the Sovereignty of Nation States, and a third one, and stay with me on this title, As to the Question of Saving America. That's the title. The subtitle is The United States Constitution is the Answer.
Are we going to still have a country and a constitution when this gets published?
I hope,
might have to change that title.
So.
You might have to call it Trumpistan. I don't know. Anyway.
I hope so. But I will tell you, on the lighter side, you might get a kick out of this. My wife, who I love dearly, Lynette.
I hope so.
I do. I love her dearly. She's my angel. She challenged me recently, telling me that she didn't think I had what it took to write a fiction novel.
Oh.
And it was because, these academic books that I love to write are so detail-oriented, and you have to prove everything, and it's not an entertaining book like a fiction novel, which she loves to read. So I'm working on a couple that I think by the end of the year I might be able to turn loose. So those are coming, and they're cut from different fiction novel genres, subgenres, so to speak. And I'm kind of excited about that. And it's a whole different kind of writing, but I love to write. And so, yeah, I got a lot going on.
I love it. So people can watch for that. Make sure you do a bet with the wife, since she doesn't have any faith in you on that point there. She's making her. You need to make a bet. I don't know. If you get a book out, you get to have your own man cave, and if she gets a book out, she gets a new kitchen or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I need to factor that into my negotiation.
Husbands, you guys kill me. You always give it up. Anyway, but it's good that you love somebody, because
absolutely.
I can't find anybody worth loving out here in the streets. Anyway, guys, give us your .coms. Where can people find out more about you on the interwebs, stay in touch with you, find out the release of your new books, et cetera, et cetera? Thank you, Jim.
I'm sorry?
Give us your .coms and all those other things where people can find you on the interwebs.
Yes. You know what? Sadly, I don't have that set up at this point. It's at the early stages of being developed by the marketing group.
Oh, that's right. So when you get that up, just send us an email or have them send us an email, and we'll put the link on the Chris Voss Show. The link will be there for the Amazon book.
I can give you the email that if you would like to do that. I'm happy to take emails and answer questions. It's my name, James Copas, JamesCopas at proton.me. Proton.me.
Proton.me. Proton mail. Proton. It sounds like a I don't know, a cinnamon bun made of protein. I don't know. That's the only, it's the end of the show, folks. I'm out of jokes. It's got to be lame at this point. That's just the way it is. Thank you very much, Jim, for coming on the show. Very insightful, wonderful discussion. And hopefully we can get some reform done to bring, the belief of people, I think one of the biggest problems is now, after losing the faith in SCOTUS, I remember there's graphs over the last 10 years where it just shown SCOTUS was like the one that everyone trusted. And they were like, yeah, the Congress, those president people, we don't know about them. But the SCOTUS we believe in. And then that just all went downhill too. And now it's kind of seems more people in American society like, just throw the whole baby out with the bathwater and start over. And you're like, I don't really think you realize the implications of that. And maybe that's what we're seeing. I don't know. It'll be interesting. Anyway, fun is fun. Thank you for coming on the show, Jim. Order up his book, folks, wherever fine books are sold. And please advocate for your democracy every day. Seriously, those people on The Bachelor are full of shit. The Politician of the American Legal System is out. You can find it wherever fine books are sold by Dr. James M. Copas. Out, I've got February 2nd, 2026. This is probably for the Kindle version. Thanks for tuning in. Go to Chris Voss, Facebook.com, LinkedIn.com, YouTube.com/Chris Voss, one word, and all that good stuff. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the most amazing, intelligent podcast ever made to improve your brain and your life. Warning, consuming too much of the Chris Voss Show podcast can lead to people thinking you're smarter, younger, and irresistible sexy. Consume in regularly moderated amounts. Consult a doctor for any resulting brain bleed.
All right, Jim. Great show, man.